Thank you, Madam President. I rise today to address the latest mass shooting in our country. This one took place last week in my own state of Maryland, in the city of Edgewood in Harford County, which is northeast of Baltimore. In this case, the suspect gathered co-workers during work hours at his place of business, Advanced Granite Solutions, and began shooting. He killed 3 co-workers and critically wounded 2 others who remain in critical condition at the Maryland Shock Trauma Center. The suspect then fled to Delaware. According to an article in the Baltimore Sun, he shot an acquaintance in the head at a car dealership. The victim was in stable condition and later identified his attacker to police. The suspect was finally arrested after a brief foot chase, and police saw the suspect throw a gun at them after spotting law enforcement approaching. This terrible shooting in Maryland came just a few weeks after the worst mass shooting in modern U.S. history, which occurred in Las Vegas, Nevada on October 1st. This mass shooting from a hotel room targeting concertgoers at an outdoor music festival left 58 dead and more than 500 people wounded, with dozens of victims still in the hospital today, some of whom are in critical condition. These are just staggering numbers. But I want to put a human face on this for my colleagues and talk about one Marylander who was injured in the Las Vegas attack. The Baltimore Sun shared the story of Tina Frost. Tina is a native of Crofton in Anne Arundel County, Maryland. She's a 2008 graduate of Arundel High School in Gambrills. She was a star soccer player in school, and she now lives in California and works at the accounting firm of Ernst & Young. The story begins before a bullet from a 32-story above cut through her face. Crofton native Tina Frost drove from San Diego with her boyfriend to see one of her favorite country artists in Las Vegas. Becky Frost said her 27-year-old sister had lost her right eye and was in a Las Vegas intensive care unit after 2 hours of surgery. She said her bubbly and charismatic older sister was in a coma that the family expected to last about a week. Another sister wrote on Facebook that the family was waiting to see the extent of the brain damage. "We're sticking together and praying," Becky Frost said. Tina Frost did wake up from the coma and was recently transferred back to Maryland for an additional surgery at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. According to the family members, she underwent a second successful surgery last week. The family's website updated said, "We're thankful Tina is still being a true fighter and warrior." Today, I want Tina and the entire Frost family to know that they're in our thoughts and prayers. I understand that their community has already been receiving funds to help defray Tina's medical expenses for her recovery. This is just one example of hundreds that were victimized in Las Vegas. I am just as heartbroken by the terror in Las Vegas. With the entire country, I'm grieving from the senseless loss of life and praying for the victims, their families, and all those who were injured like Tina Frost, whether by gunshots or the chaos that ensued. Much thanks also goes to the first responders, including our police, fire, ambulance, and emergency medical workers who saved countless lives by helping those around them and running towards danger instead of running away from it. Thoughts and prayers console victims and their families, but actions speak much louder. We must be outraged at this latest shooting, and we must act. Congress must act. States must act. Weapons of war should not be in the hands of civilians. We see the deadly results in Las Vegas, just as we've seen before in Orlando and Blacksburg and San Bernardino, Aurora, Sandy Hook, the streets of Baltimore, and elsewhere across this great country. We need to do everything in our power to stop the carnage of these shootings. How high does the death toll have to get before we enact real bipartisan reforms that will make the American public safer and reduce the risks that come from allowing such easy access to dangerous weapons primarily designed for the battlefield? Assault weapons are not needed to hunt deer or ducks. They're only meant to kill people, and they do far too often in this country. I urge my colleagues to be bold and fight to break the cycle of what can only be described as a callous disregard for victims of gun violence. More talk will not save lives. Only action and real change in federal and state laws can. This attack and others like it in recent years tears at the heart and leaves us angry, frustrated, and confused. We as a nation must resolve to stop those who wish to do harm to Americans from committing and encouraging and abetting acts of terror. We as a nation, as a community, and as an American family must take actions to change minds, hearts, and finally change policies. We can stop others and save lives by taking immediate action. I was disappointed that Congress missed yet another opportunity to enact common sense, reasonable gun safety measures after the June 2016 shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, which killed 49 people and injured 53 others. The mass shooting in Las Vegas has now sadly surpassed these numbers. In the Las Vegas massacre, Stephen Paddock used a bump-fire stock device which allowed his semi-automatic rifle to fire at a rate similar to that of a fully automatic weapon, a rate of about 9 bullets a second. Fully automatic weapons are generally illegal under current law. Paddock also stockpiled a virtual arsenal in his hotel room, as police found 23 firearms in the room. Police also found a large quantity of ammunition, including numerous high-capacity magazines capable of holding up to 100 rounds apiece. The preliminary assessment, with the understanding that the investigation is still ongoing, from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, is that the shooter legally purchased all these guns, bump stocks, and ammunition. It is outrageous that a mass shooter was legally able to purchase a device designed to convert his gun into a military-style weapon with no legitimate civilian use. It is outrageous that a mass shooter was legally able to purchase high-capacity magazine clips with no legitimate civilian use. These are weapons of war. You don't need them for hunting. You don't need them for self-defense. Earlier this month, I convened a roundtable meeting with law enforcement officials at the First Baptist Church of Highland Park in Prince George's County, Maryland. The group included officials from local, state, and federal levels, including the sheriff, the police chief of Prince George's County, state delegates, the state's attorney general of Maryland, and representatives of the U.S. Attorney's Office. Maryland has progressive laws on gun safety and has taken steps to ban weapons of war and high-capacity magazines that have no legitimate civil purpose. The group echoed the concern to me that if Maryland has strict laws relating to gun safety that protect both the public and police officers, what is to stop someone from driving over the border to one of our neighboring states in order to procure guns? That's why we need a strong national law to protect all Americans, and Congress should act on common sense gun safety measures. So what can we do in Congress? I have co-sponsored the Automatic Gunfire Prevention Act, which Senator Feinstein introduced. In the Las Vegas shooting, the gunman was able to unleash hundreds of rounds of gunfire on the crowd, likely by using a bump stock device. Fully automatic guns or machine guns are already banned for civilian use under the National Firearms Act. But a loophole exists that allows for these bump stock devices, as well as similar accessories, to convert semi-automatic weapons to emulate automatic weapons. Senator Feinstein's legislation would close the loophole in current law that allows conversion devices and accessories to be available to the public. The bill bans the sale, transfer, importation, manufacturing, or possession of bump stocks, trigger cranks, or anything that accelerates the semi-automatic rifle rate of fire. Semi-automatic rifles typically have a rate of fire of 45 to 60 rounds per minute. A bump stock can increase the semi-automatic rifle rate of fire to 700 rounds per minute, or 9 per second. I've also co-sponsored the Large Capacity Ammunition Feeding Device Act, also known as Keeping America Safe Act, introduced by Senator Menendez. It prohibits the possession or transfer of large capacity ammunition magazines, more than 10 rounds per magazine, with limited exceptions for law enforcement personnel. Senator Menendez's bill authorizes a buyback program for high-capacity magazines using Burn JAG grants. To me, these two bills represent a practical, common-sense approach to promoting gun safety and reducing the threat of gun violence without impinging on the rights of legitimate owners. Mr. President, as NBC News recently reported, more Americans have died from gunshots in the last 50 years than all the wars in America's history. Since 1968, more than 1.5 million Americans have died in gun-related instances, according to the data from the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention. I've also co-sponsored the Background Check Expansion Act introduced by Senator Murphy. This bill would expand federal background checks to cover the sale and transfer of all firearms by private sellers, just as licensed dealers are required to do so under the existing Brady law, with certain limited exceptions. Under current law, unlicensed or private sellers are not required to conduct a background check prior to transferring a firearm. This is outrageous, and Congress should act right now to close this dangerous loophole. It should not matter whether you buy a gun at a local gun store or a gun show or on the internet. You should have to pass a basic background check to make sure the guns are kept out of the hands of people who should never have one. Congress has an obligation to act. As I've indicated before, we need to act. Inaction is not an option. Many of our states have acted as well, including my own state of Maryland, but we need a national law that applies to all 50 states. Ban bump stocks, prohibit the sale of transfer of high-capacity magazine clips, eliminate private ownership of assault-type weapons, require universal background checks for all gun purchasers. The time for action is now. We cannot wait. Congress should come together and address the real problem, which is lax gun safety laws, and should pass common sense gun safety measures to protect all Americans. Let's not wait for the next mass shooting when we send our thoughts and prayers to victims and then stand by and pretend we are helpless and powerless to prevent another tragedy. Let's take action now. Mr. President, I yield the floor.